Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 54 of the Run in the Paint podcast. I'm Miles, and today we are doing a solo pod. Unfortunately, three other guys have got a lot going on, so unable to make it tonight. But I'm here. I'm going to do a solo pod for the final Run in the Paint episode of our first season of the 2023-24 season because it concluded on Monday night. We have an NBA champion, and it is the Boston Celtics, who clinched their 18th championship by winning Game 5, 106 to 88 over the Dallas Mavericks in a very dominant performance once again by the Celtics at home. A game where it was pretty much all Celtics right from the get-go. To start the game, it was a pretty slow start for both teams. I think that both teams were pretty nervous coming into the game. I think that Boston, obviously the Boston crowd was going crazy. They, had a chance to win the title on their home floor. Their first one in 18 or 16 seasons. I am recording this at 10 to 3 in the morning after Monday night. I was doing some stuff to prepare for this podcast, so we're starting a little bit late here. But yeah, man, to start this game, it was 9-2 Celtics, and the Mavericks on their first 10 possessions were 1 for 8 from the field and had 2 turnovers. They were not getting good looks offensively to start the game. And to me, that was a lot because of the Boston Celtics defense, which continued to be phenomenal tonight. Drew Holiday and Derek White, they continued to do an incredible job guarding this Mavericks backcourt, who really neither of Luka or Kyrie had very good games tonight. I mean, when you look at Luka, you can look at the box score and see he had 28 points, 12 boards, 5 assists, 3 steals on 48% shooting from the field. But he really was not that great in this game. He had 10 of those points in the fourth quarter when the game was basically over anyways. He did have 9 in the third quarter, but the first half, Luka and Kyrie Irving combined for 14 points on 6 for 18 shooting on the road in an elimination game. That's not at all what you can afford to do. A total opposite from what happened in Game 4 in Dallas. Kyrie Irving had 15 points, 9 assists, but on 5 of 16 shooting, 3 for 9 from 3, and got a bunch of those in the fourth quarter. And the other guys really didn't step up either for the Mavericks. PJ Washington, 2 for 7, 4 points. Derek Jones was solid, attacking 10 points, but he was only 1 for 4 from 3. Josh Green was very solid off the bench at 4 threes. He was really the only Maverick to get it going from downtown this game. But just a rough series for the Mavericks when you look at, the shooting, just that they were unable to really get any consistency on the offensive end besides Game 4 there, where they, just completely blew the Celtics out of the building there in their home barn, not wanting to get swept at home especially. So we got to talk a lot about the Boston Celtics, man. We have to. The 2024 NBA champions, and they deserve it, man. This is a season where I'm very happy and comfortable knowing that the Celtics are NBA champions. This is the first time in 7 seasons where the team that had the best record in the regular season actually went on to win the title. And it sort of feels like that. I mean, the last 7 years, you look last year, you could say, okay, the Nuggets, that is a, comfortable champion. They were the best team in the West all year. But you look in the Eastern Conference, the Milwaukee Bucks that year or last year, they were the number 1 seed and got eliminated in the first round by Miami. They were the best team in really the league all season. And the Giannis injury obviously made them lose in the first round. The Nuggets kind of steamrolled their way to a title. The previous years, a lot of parity, especially the Suns Bucks season. Golden State really, when they won it in 2022, they really weren't having a crazy season. That was the Suns that were having an insane regular season. Then you've got the Lakers. The Bucks were, the best team in 2020 for, the entire regular season. Then COVID hit. Obviously, we go to the bubble, and things could have been so different there. The Raptors winning it, and then even the Rockets in 2018, they were the best team all year, and then Golden State took it in the postseason. So really, since the first year of the Kevin Durant Golden State Warriors, this is the first time where really the best team in the league all season ended up winning the title. And this is how it should be. The Celtics, they were the best team in the NBA coming in. They were the best team all season long, the number one record in the league by far. They had the best record locked up like 3-4 weeks before the season even ended. And then the playoffs, they dominated just the same. Now, do got to talk about I've mentioned it so much on this podcast about the narrative of this team playing injured teams, having an easy run to these finals, playing the injured Heat, injured Cavaliers, eventually the injured Pacers, and then really dismantling this Mavericks team. It really doesn't make sense to me, the logic of it all. Like, they had an easy path, but they were by far the best team. Honestly, this was a very, very unfortunate season for injuries in the NBA and specifically the Eastern Conference. I know a few episodes ago when we were kind of doing a recap-ish, of the playoffs, one of the questions I posed to the guys was, what was the biggest disappointment from the postseason? And mine was the amount of injuries in the East because of all the key players that had to miss a ton of games. Of course, the Knicks, Julius Randle had to miss he missed most of the season, but missed the whole playoffs. OG Anunoby had to miss time. The Bucks, of course, the Cavs, the Pacers, the Heat. I've talked about that all before with all their guys missing time. But, the Celtics were so dominant, and they are such a great team. Most likely, even if all those teams were healthy, they're still winning this championship. So this is well-deserved. I think if there's any year for there to be this many injuries in one conference, it's better that it's this year and that it didn't happen to the best team. Well, and even Porzingis missed most of the playoffs. The Celtics were the best team, and they deserve this championship, and they played like it, man. All of them really showed out in this Game 5. Jason Tatum had an incredible game in this one. 31 points, 8 boards, 11 assists in this game. I thought that this type of performance in the closeout game would potentially get him the Finals MVP, but instead it went to Jaylen Brown, who also had a very good game in this one, 21, 8, and 6. Let's talk about that Finals MVP. It goes to Jaylen Brown instead of Jason Tatum. I honestly was shocked. I thought that this was 100% going to go to Jason Tatum just because you look up the counting stats from the series. Tatum's numbers, his counting numbers are better. He's averaging 22 points, 8 boards, 7 assists in these finals, all-around performance on not good efficiency at all. 39% from the field, 26% from 3. And then Brown, 21 points, 5 boards, 5 assists, 44% from the field. Still struggled from 3, but was terrific on the inside. These last 2 games for Brown kind of ruined his field goal percentage a little bit. But across the board, both of these guys could have deserved the Finals MVP. I think the voting results might be out by the time I'm recording this. I could check that right now. But even as soon as Jaylen Brown, he got the award, and he was doing the interview with Lisa Salters up there after receiving the trophy, and he said immediately, that I couldn't have done this without Jason Tatum. We won this together. We won this as a team, and Tatum and Brown did it together. And that duo, they've come a long way, man. I'm going to get to how Boston got to this point, being NBA champions from where they were. But those two, they played terrific together. And looking at this, Jaylen Brown had 7 of the 11 votes for NBA Finals MVP. And of course, the other 4 go to Jason Tatum. So very interesting there. 6. I was thinking it could be 6, 5, 7, 4. That is very, very. That makes a lot of sense. That it was that close, because both of those guys could have won this award. And even Drew Holiday was a guy that was up there as well, because he was so efficient in this series. Actually led the Celtics in offensive rebounding, not even just in this finals, but in the whole playoffs. But in this game, he was spectacular. 15 points, 11 rebounds, and 4. So this is crazy. When you look at the rebounding, that's been something that's been pretty key in this series. Um, the Celtics, every one of their starters, all 5 of their starters had at least 8 rebounds, which is incredible. Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, and Derek White, all with 8 boards. And those are your wing guys, essentially. Horford with 9 boards, and then Drew Holiday, basically your point guard, with 11 boards. It's just incredible. And then White and Holiday combined for 8 offensive rebounds. Sam Hauser off the bench had 3, and the Mavericks as a team had 7. That was something that was huge. I mean, Game 4 is a game that it's gonna kind of skew the numbers a little bit in to make it a little closer than it actually was, because the Mavericks just dominated on the boards in Game 4. But Boston really controlled the glass for a majority of this series, and it's a huge reason why they won. Getting the rebounds, but it really was their defense that was just so incredible in this series. Like Luka and Kyrie, they didn't look comfortable really at many points in this series. Every single shot that they got was a difficult shot. They had to work for everything, and they're involved in so much with that Dallas offense because there's not a lot of self-creators outside of Irving and Doncic. They get tired very quickly, and then the Celtics just kept going at them defensively, and that's why the Celtics are able to get so many good looks offensively, is because a lot of times they're going against. They have the advantage. The Mavericks have the mismatch on the floor, especially when Kyrie and Luka are both on the floor and then not able to really get it going offensively. So the Celtics, they just did an incredible job this whole series. Um, I know I can speak for probably most people out there saying that, I wish that this was a much more competitive finals. I think that if we may do this later on the podcast eventually in a future episode, but if you had to rank the last 10 NBA finals this season and last season, probably the bottom 2, which is unfortunate because it means that we really haven't gotten legendary, amazing finals basketball in a long time. But I think that goes to say how great the Celtics were. Like, I know people are this whole offseason are probably going to have a bad taste in their mouth, specifically with Kyrie Irving, because he just didn't look like himself, especially the games in Boston. He played a lot better in Dallas, of course, like most of these guys. But even Luka didn't look he didn't look spectacular either. And people are probably going to be harping on those 2 guys a lot. And yes, I think Luka, I'm going to be critical with Luka on this series because I think that he could have been a lot better, and he is going to get a lot better from this series and from this playoff run. Like, you think a guy that was, I believe, second in MVP voting or third. He was in the top 3 behind Jokic and Shea. You would think a guy that averaged basically a 34-point triple-double in the regular season is at his peak, but he could get a lot better. There's another level that he can rise to. And this guy's only 24 years old going on. This is his first deep playoff run. I know they made the Western Conference Finals a couple years ago back in 2022, but this was really his deepest run, playing against much better competition in these playoffs, specifically with the matchups defensively. I mean, you think in this playoff run he had to go against the Clippers, who have Paul George, Terrence Mann, solid defenders. OKC has, they have length at every position, and getting guarded by Lou Dort, who did a solid job defensively on him, is always known as a very good defender. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, one of the best star defenders in the league. Minnesota, the best defense in the league, with Edwards, McDaniels guarding you on the wing. And then this Boston team where you have, in my opinion, the 2 best defensive guards on the same team. This is a very, very difficult run. For him to even average what he did was incredible. I mean, in these finals, he averaged 29 points, 47% from the field, but was really off from downtown. He really couldn't get many good looks from three. The Mavericks really couldn't eat, as a team. They really couldn't get anything going from three. Their only rotation player, their stable rotation player, the only one that shot over 28% from three was Josh Green at 54.5% on just 2 attempts. But Luka, 24%, Kyrie and PJ, 27%, Derek Jones, 25%. Like, that's just it's not really gonna work for you. I forgot to mention the Derek Lively, 1 for 1 from three. He's at 100%. That'll be something he could add to his game later. But this Luka Doncic has a lot that he could improve on. I think that in previous years he's talked about wanting to go back as far as the complaining to officials and all that sort of thing. But I think that it really costing the Mavericks in this series, specifically Game 3, and then the defense really throughout the whole series. I think that this series is going to make him change that and get better on that end of the floor heading into next season. Now, I know in the post-game interview, he said something like he's got to make some decisions. He's got something to think about. I think that that's just about the Olympics. I don't think it's about anything crazy. I don't know what it would be about. I really don't know. But I think Luka's going to be a lot better. And Kyrie, I'm a little disappointed in Kyrie Irving because he just didn't look like himself at certain points in this series. But again, this backcourt is going against one of the best defensive backcourts you could ask for. I mean, the 2 best defensive guards in basketball, Drew Holiday and Derek White. I mean, there's not much. It's understandable that you're going to struggle against those 2 guys and not play to your capabilities. There weren't many players this whole season that really could get whatever they wanted against those guys. That's why those two players made all defense, and that's a big reason why the Celtics brought these 2 guys together and they had all the success that they had. Quickly before we go more on the Boston Celtics, this Dallas Mavericks, I want to talk a little bit about their future. Because they had a very, very good season. I think we can all agree that no one expected them to be playing in June, to be in the NBA Finals. So the fact that they even made this point after such a disappointment last year, in a span of 2 years, losing Jalen Brunson for nothing. The next year, kind of making up for it with trading for Kyrie Irving for not much, but then missing the playoffs, missing the play-in entirely, tanking the final game to ensure that you're in the lottery. And then, of course, everyone's like, oh, is Kyrie Irving going to leave? Is Luka Doncic eventually going to request a trade? Because there's not much really on this team after Luka. And if Kyrie leaves, there's really not much on this team for Luka. Are the Mavericks going to be back, down at the bottom of the league like they were before they got Luka Doncic? And this season, Kyrie and Luka, they worked a lot better. The Kyrie Irving trade was obviously very, very successful. And middle of the season, they acquire PJ Washington, Daniel Gafford. And now, going into next year, all their guys, nearly this whole roster is under contract for next year, except Derek Jones Jr., their starting small forward, which that's a little interesting. He was only making $2 million this year, the minimum contract, and he'll now be an unrestricted free agent. So that he's gonna want to get paid, most likely. I mean, I think that he was able to show a lot this year. I know this finals, he really struggled from downtown, but the previous 3 rounds, he was fantastic. Like for the playoffs, his numbers is 38% from three, and he shot 20% in this series, 25% from three in this series. So coming into this series, he was around that 40% mark from the 3-point line. So teams love that 40%, especially in the postseason. So he's going to want to get paid. Because teams could definitely use his services just to see also his work defensively. Of course, I mean, he's an incredible athlete. And just, him playing alongside Luka and Kyrie, it's always good to have these good performances alongside other stars. So he's going to have a good market out there. But that's really the only thing that the Mavericks have to take care of as far as bringing a guy back. We'll see if they decide to make any moves to try to improve the depth of this roster and maybe get some more offensive creation. Because, like I said, Luka and Kyrie, once you get after those guys, there's really not a whole lot besides like Jaden Hardy, who still has work to do defensively in order to get consistent rotational minutes. But this is only his second year in the league, so he can obviously get a lot better. He's had a very solid couple of years, and he had his moments in these playoffs. Interested to see if they use Tim Hardaway Jr.'s contract as a trade chip. He's going to be on the final year of his deal at $16 million. So we'll see if, a team is willing to take on his money and maybe a draft pick to maybe give the Mavericks another guy there, maybe another creator. Interesting things that the Mavericks could do there, but they'll basically have this same team going into next year. And that's fantastic because they were fantastic the second half of the year and coming into these playoffs. I mean, as a 5 seed, getting all the way to this point, the only team, I believe, in NBA history to defeat 3 50-win teams, which is incredible when you really think about it. And, this team's definitely got a bright future. Of course, Luka, only 25 years old, and Kyrie Irving coming off of another great year. The talk that has transpired on social media of how we got from, conversations after the Western Conference Finals against Minnesota where Luka and Kyrie were great. And then the talk is this the greatest backcourt that we've ever seen? Is this the most talented backcourt in NBA history? And, rightfully so. Those two guys were playing great. We talked about it a bunch on this podcast in earlier episodes. How, this backcourt duo needs more longevity. Because of course you got Steph Curry, Klay Thompson with the Golden State Warriors, who've got, all those championships, all that success, regular season and postseason. This is the first playoff run for Kyrie and Luka. But as far as pure talent, these two guys right up there with any backcourt that's ever played in the NBA. But we go from that to these two guys struggling, or I guess in the first 2 games, Kyrie Irving struggling and not looking like himself against, again, the 2 best defensive guards in the league, the best defensive backcourt, one of the best ones that we've ever seen. And it says, oh, Luka's got no help. Which is ridiculous. It's ridiculous. Like, these 2 guys are incredible. They had an incredible run. These 5 games should not take away from the rest of the run that they had in the regular season and the playoffs, because they were incredible all year long. Just besides these, really these 5 games. I mean, besides Game 4, which again was a blowout. I mean, Joey said it perfectly. This is the, prototypical gentleman sweep where, Celtics win the first 3 games. They're like, all right, we want to close it out at home. The Mavericks win by 38 points, and then they come out and blow out the Mavericks and win Game 5. So this Mavericks team, they definitely got a bright future. But that Luka and Kyrie thing, like, people switching so quickly, even though they're playing against the NBA champions, it's ridiculous. But the Mavericks, great season. Kudos to the Mavericks for an incredible season again after not making the playoffs last year to get all the way to the NBA Finals. It's definitely a successful season for them. But let's talk a lot more about this Boston Celtics team, man. Because even though they were the best team all season long, they did it dominantly. They did it in a way to where, like, during the regular season and even in these playoffs, there really wasn't a whole lot to talk about with them besides, like, all right, this team's very, very good. Their great players are very, very they're great. I mean, Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, great regular seasons. I guess the big talk was Derek White maybe being an all-star, which I mean he played like one. I mean he's the best role player in the league. I mean if you made an all NBA role player team for regular season and play, he's number one. He's no question number one on this list. The Porzingis edition worked out very, very well in the regular. They were just dominant in a way to where you couldn't really talk about them much in the regular season because, it's just they're very good on both sides of the ball. The thing we probably talked about the most on this podcast was about how, their main weaknesses coming in the playoffs would probably be their bench because, when you stack them up against other benches, and really only able to go 7-8 deep with Pritchard, Hauser, Luke Cornett, and that being your three bench guys, if that would be able to be solid. Well, and of course Horford on the bench as well, but going 7-8 deep on this team, and then in clutch situations, because we've seen it with this team before, how they would resort back to one-on-one ISO ball and just get out of their rhythm. Because this Boston Celtics team, it's all about the ball movement to me. That is why this team is so special offensively, because they shoot a lot of threes. Of course, it's in today's game. You hear Joe Mazzulla talk all about, how the NBA a lot of times is really a math problem. You got to get up a lot of threes, and you're probably going to make them with the shooters that they have, but they don't do it in a way that is forced. I know, shout out to Goglin, cover your ears, but like the Daryl Morey, Mike D'Antoni, Houston Rockets with James Harden, where they were literally forcing threes. They were forcing threes. They did not want anyone on their team shooting mid-range shots, forcing threes. They thought, analytically, the best shots are layups and threes. So the Rockets only take those, do not take mid-rangers. And get them all in isolation from James Harden and Chris Paul and then Eric Gordon off the bench. This team has it all from all areas of the court, and they know that. So they exploit all areas of the court. All these guys can make a play from the three-point line to mid-range to right at the basket. And it's so special. I mean, this team is just so they have it all. They've had so many pieces. I've been saying it during the playoffs. They're just so difficult to guard when they're moving the ball and not stationary because they just have so many weapons offensively that can hurt you. Like the best strategy that I would keep noticing is, all right, basically you're better off just playing them one-on-one defensively. We've seen that over the last few years. We've seen that when they get into clutch time, they're worse really when they resort to one-on-one play because, the ball movement is really what that makes them so dangerous offensively. But they just did a great job of consistently moving the basketball in these playoffs. Averaged 24 assists per game in the finals and in the playoffs. And their star guys really led the way with the playmaking. Like Jason Tatum in these playoffs averaged 6 assists per game. Jaylen Brown averaged 3, Holiday and White each about 4.5 assists as well. But like everyone, they just spread the ball around, and it's just so great to watch. And the ball movement, the defense, and of course, they got the players, they got the star powers to make tough shots. When teams are playing good defense, they have players to throw up grenades. I know that's a term that a lot of players use when they get the ball with like 5 on the shot clock and they've got to throw up a tough shot. They've got guys to make grenade type shots when they need to in difficult situations. But I want to talk a bit about how the Boston Celtics got here, their road to this championship, because I think that something that's underrated about this team that really has not been talked about and probably won't get talked about a lot because it's not a very fun thing to really talk about, but how they transitioned eras, from one to the next. And, after their big 3, big 4 era, that's something random that pops in my mind sometimes. The previous Boston Celtics era, when you have Paul Pierce, Ray Allen, Kevin Garnett. Obviously, those are your three big names, and you acquired Allen and Garnett. But people garner that as a big three when Rajon Rondo ended up being the best player in certain playoff situations. So it really should be a big four. All four of them made the All-Star game one season as well. But them transitioning from that era to essentially this Brown Tatum era that we're in right now. But so I'm gonna play a video of the Celtics highlights really from these whole playoffs because everyone really chipped in for this team. Got highlights of every single player, doing their thing throughout these whole playoffs. My goodness, Peyton Pritchard again with the half court shot in this game. It was unbelievable. But really getting to this Celtics road to banner number 18, giving them the most in NBA history, all dates back to the end of 2013, after the Boston Celtics lose in 6 games to the New York Knicks in the first round. That was their last go. That was with Paul Pierce, with Kevin Garnett. Rajon Rondo had a season-ending injury, and Ray Allen, of course, bolted to Miami in the previous offseason. But after that, in a span of like a week and a half, Doc Rivers went over to the LA Clippers. He resigned from the Boston Celtics. He went over to the Clippers. They hired Brad Stevens to be their head coach, coming over from Butler University. And they made the big trade, which I guess this is what people talk about as far as transitioning eras, but people look at it as far as the Brooklyn Nets side. But the Celtics trading Paul Pierce, Kevin Garnett, Jason Terry, and DJ White, along with a first-round pick and a second-round pick to the Nets for 5 players that really don't matter nowadays, with Chris Humphries, Keith Bogans, Marshawn Brooks, Gerald Wallace, Chris Joseph. But the 4 unprotected first-round picks between 2014 and 2018, those are the 4 biggies that everyone loves to talk about. Why, a lot of people, especially Nick and Joey, have garnered the Nets as the GFF garbage failure franchise. I may be wrong on that one right there, but that put them in their rebuild. The next season, they came into the season with a starting lineup of Rondo, Avery Bradley at the 2, Jeff Green, Brandon Bass, and Jared Sullinger. Avery Bradley was really their big jump up that season. He was coming off of an all-defensive second team the previous year as a bit of a catch-and-shoot guy with Pierce and Garnett and Rondo. But this 2013-14 season, not a whole lot of W's. They went 25-57, but Avery Bradley bumped his points average from 9 to 15, increasing his three-point percentage from 32 to 40%. So that was really their big thing. And Avery Bradley, of course, a key player in a future Celtic teams after this. But this is how crazy it is, to how far they come. Their big highlight of that season was probably Jordan Crawford winning Player of the Week one week. Incredible. That's a fun trivia question with that one. But 25-57, 12th in the East. They get a lottery pick. They draft Marcus Smart with the 6th overall pick. They acquire Tyler Zeller and a first-round pick in a 3-team trade involving the Nets once again and also the Cavaliers. In that offseason, they extended Avery Bradley for 4 years, $32 million, which is a very good contract at the time for someone of Bradley's value who just had that very good season. And they also brought over Evan Turner for 2 years, $6 million. He had spent the last few years in Philadelphia and then a half year with the Indiana Pacers. But coming into that year, this is the 2014-15 season. Entering that year, still with Rondo on their roster, with Bradley, Jeff Green, Kelly Olynyk, and Jared Sullinger. Kelly Olynyk entering his second year in the league. He was their lottery. He was their first-round pick from back in 2013. And this year, this really was the big transition year. They started the year 9-14, and then December 18th, they moved Rajon Rondo, the final piece from the 2008 championship team. They move Rondo and Dwight Powell to the Dallas Mavericks. Funny how things come full circle. In exchange for a couple pieces, including Jay Crowder, and then another first-round pick and then a second-round pick. Jay Crowder, another key piece that we'll get to later for the Boston Celtics. Then about a month later, they traded, in a 3-team trade, they acquired a first-round pick, basically in exchange for trading Jeff Green to the Memphis Grizzlies. Jeff Green, the leading scorer for the Celtics for a couple years during that rebuilding time. And then a month later, at the trade deadline, in another 3-team deal, they traded for Isaiah Thomas from the Phoenix Suns. And at this point, they were 20-33. And everyone's like, all right, this is a rebuilding team. Of course, second year of the rebuild, first real year of it, dealing Rondo to the Mavericks and dealing Jeff Green, really your 2-3 best players during the season. And 20-33. And then they finished the year 20-9 to make the playoffs as a 7th seed. They finished 40-42. Their starting lineup, it completely flipped from opening night to the playoffs. Their opening lineup, like I said, Rondo, Bradley, Jeff Green, Olynyk, and Sullinger. Avery Bradley was the only starter remaining for game 1 of their playoff series against the Cleveland Cavaliers, where they started Marcus Smart, Bradley, Evan Turner, Brandon Bass, and Tyler Zeller. Completely flipped. And they did get swept by the Cavaliers that year, but then making the playoffs that year, incredible. Back in 2015, but even you look at the moves they made during the season, in all, they basically traded Rondo, Jeff Green, a first and a second for Isaiah Thomas, Jay Crowder, Jonas Jerebko's the name I didn't mention, 2 first-round picks and 5 second-round picks. Danny Ainge loved getting those draft picks in at the time, but in that 2015 offseason, they drafted Terry Rozier with the 16th overall pick, their own first-round pick. And then they also signed Amir Johnson for 2 years, $24 million to be their starting power forward. And they extended Jerebko and Jay Crowder, 2 of the guys that they acquired midseason that were helpful to them making the playoffs. And then entering the season, crazy to think that Isaiah Thomas was coming off the bench and then eventually became an all-star that year. Averaged 22.6 assists. Jay Crowder jumped 5 points per game, was 6th in most improved player. And they were a very, very solid team. They ended up making the playoffs as the 5th seed in the East, 48-34, and they lost a competitive first-round series in 6 games to the Atlanta Hawks that year. In a series that could have been very different, but Avery Bradley and Jay Crowder were both really banged up. Avery Bradley only played 1 game in that series. But then 2016, the first real big off season, they get with the 3rd pick from the Brooklyn Nets from the Paul Pierce trade, they draft Jaylen Brown, the 2024 NBA Finals MVP. And then they also signed Al Horford for 4 years, $112 million at the time, the max contract coming over from the Atlanta Hawks. And then this was the Isaiah Thomas big season where he averaged nearly 30 points per game on very good efficiency. At 5'9", incredible, was 5th in MVP, 5th in most improved, an all-star again, all-NBA second team. And the Celtics were the number 1 seed in the East at 53-29. Had a first-round scare against the Chicago Bulls, the 8-seeded Bulls. They were down 0-2. Rondo gets injured for the Bulls, and the Celtics go on and win 4 straight games. Very entertaining 7-game series against the Washington Wizards that they ended up pulling out thanks to crazy Kelly Olynyk. Game 7, then they get romped by the Cavs in 5 games. And in the Eastern Conference Finals. And I think that that Danny Ainge at the time was like, okay, we were just the number 1 seed, but we know that we have to make some moves really to compete. And this being a number 1 seed, they made a ton of changes in the offseason in 2017. First, from the Brooklyn Nets, they got the number 1 pick which they then traded to the Philadelphia 76ers in exchange for the third pick and a future first. That third pick, of course, being Jason Tatum, the incredible all-star, all-NBA player that we know now. And of course, the Sixers ended up drafting Markelle Fultz with the first pick, which did not work out at all for the Sixers. Crazy that the Celtics, they acquired Jason Tatum plus another first for Markelle Fultz. It's incredible what they pulled off, but that's not the only move they make. They traded Avery Bradley and a second-round pick to the Pistons for Marcus Morris. They signed all-star Gordon Hayward to a 3-year, $93 million deal. They signed Aaron Baines to be their backup center. And the big shocker here was when they traded Isaiah Thomas to the Cleveland Cavaliers, along with Jay Crowder, the 2018 Brooklyn first, and a second-round pick to the Cavs for Kyrie Irving. So completely flipping their roster. 6 key rotation guys with your 4 starters, actually, with Isaiah Thomas, Avery Bradley, Jay Crowder, and Amir Johnson. And then along with Jonas Jerebko and Kelly Olynyk out the door. And then in comes Kyrie Irving, Jason Tatum, Gordon Hayward, Marcus Morris, and Aaron Baines, the only 4 returning players for the Celtics from, again, that number 1 seed in 2017, Jaylen Brown, Al Horford, Terry Rozier, and Marcus Smart. And, of course, Gordon Hayward gets injured in the very first game against the Cavs, that brutal injury. And then Kyrie Irving was ruled out of the playoffs after undergoing surgery on his knee to take care of some things inside his knee from the 2015 finals when he fractured his knee there for the Cavs. But the Celtics, even with the injuries, they won more games than the previous year, 55 wins. They were second in the Eastern Conference. But Irving and Hayward, of course, out for the playoffs. And this is when Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum, they really showed up that season. Tatum in his rookie year, Brown his second year. Both really took leaps in leading that team, along with Terry Rozier was huge as well, along with Horford, Marcus Smart, Marcus Morris. And really all 3 of the series that they played in, they were really the underdogs in the first round. Even though they were the 2nd seed, they were going up against the 7th seed Milwaukee Bucks, who with Giannis, Chris Middleton, that was the first year of Eric Bledsoe. This Celtics team with not much experience in the playoffs wasn't expected that they were going to win that, but they won that in 7 games. Very shockingly, they beat the Philadelphia 76ers in round 2 in 5 games. And then, of course, lose to LeBron and the Cavs in 7 in the Eastern Conference Finals. But Tatum, that was really his coming out party, especially in the Eastern Conference Finals. Had some big highlight plays against LeBron James. Everyone remembers his poster dunk in Game 7, but they came up short. And in the off season, they really didn't make any changes. They drafted Robert Williams with their first round pick, the 27th overall pick in the 2018 draft. But the whole offseason, everyone around the league, all fans were talking about, man, this team took LeBron and the Cavs to 7 games in the Eastern Conference Finals without Kyrie Irving, without Gordon Hayward. You add those 2 to the mix, this team should breeze through the Eastern Conference, and Warriors-Celtics finals should be inevitable. But this team, fully healthy altogether, they really struggled to gain consistency. It was a rough mix of guys, with Brown, Tatum, and Rozier, seeing all the success that they had with the ball in their hands a lot more, having to share it now with guys like Kyrie Irving, Gordon Hayward, Al Horford, proven all-star players that deserve touches as well, even guys that were up for deals with Horford, Irving, Marcus Morris even. So because of that, they really struggled to gain consistency. They were one of the league's worst offenses through the first half of that season, ended the season, finishing top 10 in both offense and defense, but fell short. They ended up the 4th seed. They swept the Pacers in the first round without Victor Oladipo, an injured Pacers team, and then got dominated by the number 1 seeded Milwaukee Bucks that season. And that it was looking rough. That was really a step back for this team, a real disappointment with all that talent, and just really did not perform. And they let Kyrie Irving essentially walk to the Brooklyn Nets. Al Horford left for the Philadelphia 76ers. That was a wacky time with Horford and Embiid both on the Sixers. But to make up for that, the point guard, they acquired Kemba Walker from the Charlotte Hornets. That was a big thing. An all-star Kemba Walker in exchange for Terry Rozier and a second-round pick. They signed Enes Kanter. They drafted Grant Williams with their first-round pick that year. They extended Jaylen Brown to the max rookie deal, which was a bit of a controversial thing at the time to sign Jaylen Brown to the max. But huge season for this Celtics team. Gordon Hayward looked a lot better like his old self. Kemba Walker was an all-star that year. Jason Tatum broke out into his first all-star appearance in year number 3. Jaylen Brown averaged 20 points per game that season. And in that short year, they went 48-24, third in the East. And in the bubble, they swept the Sixers in the first round, beat the 2-seeded Raptors in 7 games, that eventually lost to the bubble Miami Heat in the Eastern Conference Finals. But their third conference finals in 4 years. But a very, very good bounce back year after 2019. A huge disappointment. It was very important that they bounced back that year and got to see Tatum and Brown break out into 20-point scores. Then in the 2020 offseason, they drafted they had actually 3 pretty good first-round picks. They drafted Aaron Nesmith with the 14th pick, Peyton Pritchard at 26, of course, on this Celtics team now. And then something that maybe still hurts for Celtics fans, even though they won a title now, but Desmond Bane at 30 and then trading him. That's rough, man. Desmond Bane would have been crazy on this team as well. But they lose Gordon Hayward. He went to the Charlotte Hornets. He chased a bag there with the Hornets. They signed Jeff Teague and Tristan Thompson. Those were their big signings that season, really. Excuse me. But that season, another pretty inconsistent year, of course, losing Gordon Hayward. But Kemba Walker was injured a lot. Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum both had to garner a lot more load offensively. They were both all-stars. Brown was an all-star for the first time. They both averaged around 25 points per game. Midway through the year, they traded for Evan Fournier and Luke Cornett on this roster now. But they were a 500 team that year, 7th in the East, and they lost in the first round to the KD, Kyrie, and James Harden Brooklyn Nets. And after that year, 7th in the East, 500, losing in the first round in 5 games. Major disappointment for this team coming off of 3 conference finals in 4 years. So Brad Stevens moves from his head coaching spot to the front office, and the Celtics get Ime Udoka as their head coach for the 2021-2022 season. And immediately, Brad Stevens, his first move was to get Al Horford back. Al Horford, things didn't really work out in Philly. They shipped him to Oklahoma City at the time, and the Thunder sent Al Horford back to the Celtics for Kemba Walker, a first and a second. Rare situation where the Celtics are actually giving away a first-round pick here. But this season didn't start out the best. 2021-22, I guess the only year ended up with Ime Udoka as the head coach. They started the year just 18-21. This was the time where everyone was, man, does Tatum and Brown, are they really going to fit together? They really should trade one of them because these two guys are way too similar. That's not really working offensively. The defense isn't really that great. New head coach, it really isn't working coming off of a 500 year the previous season. But this Celtics team, they didn't quit at all. February 10th, right before the deadline, they acquired Derek White from the San Antonio Spurs. Another time they traded first-round picks, they traded 2 first-round picks, Romeo Langford and Josh Richardson, to the Spurs for Derek White. And the Celtics, after starting the year 18-21, finished 33-10, dominant second half of the season to finish 51-31, second best record in the Eastern Conference. Another all-star appearance for Jason Tatum, very good year for Jaylen Brown. And Marcus Smart, Defensive Player of the Year, the only point guard to win Defensive Player of the Year besides Gary Payton. Then in the playoffs, shockingly a little bit, they swept the Brooklyn Nets in the first round with Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving. They swept them. This defense was so incredible, like it is now. At the time, they were one of the best defensive teams really in NBA history that we had seen, and really made things difficult for Durant and Irving that series. Then they defeat the Bucks in 7 games in round number 2 after trailing 3-2 in that series. Jason Tatum, magnificent in Game 6, and then the Grant Williams Game 7 to get the Bucks to the conference finals, where they would play the number 1 seeded Miami Heat and win that in 7 games, but then lose to the Golden State Warriors in 6 games in the NBA Finals, but making the NBA Finals a huge leap for this team the first time. But Jason Tatum really struggled in that series, turned the ball over a lot. The Warriors did a great job defending him. They did a solid job on Jaylen Brown. Jaylen Brown had a very good series that year in the 2022 finals. But after that offseason, another great bounce back year for the Celtics. Ime Udoka gets suspended from the team for inappropriate misconduct. So they go ahead and promote Joe Mazzulla from assistant to head coach, the youngest head coach in the NBA. They also, at the time, acquired Malcolm Brogdon from the Indiana Pacers, ended up being the 6th man of the year that year for the Boston Celtics. Another, they were fantastic. This just being really last season. When you look at the starting 5 of Marcus Smart, Derek White, Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, Al Horford, very good starting 5, very good regular season. They go to the playoffs as the 2nd seed. And they beat the Hawks in 6 games. They defeat the 76ers in 7 games, again after being down 3 games to 2. They get 2 big performances from Jason Tatum. The 50 in Game 7, big fourth quarter in Game 6. Really struggled the rest of the way, but Jason Tatum got them to the conference finals against the 8th seeded Miami Heat, where they went down 0-3, came all the way back, forced Game 7. But in the first minute of Game 7 at home in Boston, Jason Tatum hurts his ankle on the first play of the game. And really the Celtics, they couldn't respond. Tatum was not his normal self. And Jaylen Brown really didn't step up when his team needed him to. So it was a big disappointment for the Celtics to lose to the 8th seeded Heat in the conference finals, even be down 0-3, but then eventually get yourself to have the chance in Game 7. And just not Jaylen Brown, they needed him to step up, and he really didn't in that game. And it was a big disappointment. But once again, a big revolving theme with the Celtics team that I want to talk about a little bit later is how even when they have a successful regular season, if it doesn't work out in the playoffs, or even you don't have a successful regular season, if something doesn't work out, we're going to adjust. We are not going to keep the same thing 2 straight years in a row. They say the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over. So that's what this team lived by. They made changes every year, to make themselves better. And, so the one year they didn't was the year that they disappointed in the 2018-2019 season. But the 2023 offseason, just last summer, a couple of big moves. Acquiring Kristaps Porzingis and 2 first-round picks in a 3-team deal involving the Wizards and the Grizzlies. You send out Marcus Smart, which at the time was a very, very difficult decision because, Marcus Smart, of course, Defensive Player of the Year a couple of years ago, I guess the best defensive guard in the NBA from that standard, and even in that season, best defensive guard in the NBA. Moving him for a guy in Porzingis, can he fit on this team? Can he be a winning basketball player? We saw him in Dallas with Luka. Really didn't work out. Can he work with this team? And of course, his injury history, he's not the most durable guy. Would that really mesh well with the Celtics? And then the other question too, you're trading a point guard for a center. You're basically making Derek White your main point guard. Will it work with really only having him and Peyton Pritchard as your point guards? Little did we know that later in the offseason that Drew Holiday was going to be available after the Milwaukee Bucks traded him for Damian Lillard. And the Celtics traded for Drew Holiday to fill that position with moving reigning 6th man of the year Malcolm Brogdon, Robert Williams, who was a key defensive player the last couple of years for that team, But to create this incredible supernova starting lineup of Holiday, White, Brown, Tatum, Porzingis, dominant year all season long. Go 64-18 during the regular season and basically breeze their way through these playoffs. Go 16-3 by defeating the Heat in 5, the Cavs in 5, Pacers in 4, and then the Mavericks in 5 in the NBA Finals to get to this point. I mean, they did an incredible job of transitioning from eras. And yes, that's in big part thanks to the Brooklyn Nets for giving them all their draft picks, giving them basically spoon feeding them Brown and Tatum, and then eventually that got them Kyrie Irving, who incredible player. I know Celtics fans hate him now, but was a huge move at the time. They were able to get Kyrie, Brown, and Tatum essentially for Pierce and Garnett when they needed to transition from one era to the next. So they did an incredible job of, I said before, of when something didn't work, changing it and making moves when they were trying to win. The 2017 year where they're the number 1 seed, they get smoked by the Cavs and see Isaiah Thomas hurts his hip. They're like, okay, we were just the number 1 seed. We are going to change this entire roster and be better and be better. 2019 didn't work out so well. Okay, we'll change up this roster again. We're gonna get a new all-star point guard, Kemba Walker. A backup center. They got Enes Kanter at the time, who was solid for them. And they had another bounce back season after that. 2021. All right, we're 500. We won 1 playoff game. We were a playing team at the time. All right, we're going to move Brad Stevens to the front office. We're going to get a new head coach in Ime Udoka. We're going to trade Kemba Walker to get Al Horford back, who we know has been very solid for the Celtics team. And even that didn't start out very well. Again, under 500. All right, we're going to make the backcourt even better defensively. Get Derek White. Like, it just goes on and on and on with this team. Like, I could, I already mentioned it all before. I could just keep going. They need another playmaker. They get Malcolm Brogdon. They lose to the Heat. All right, we're going to get better and get Porzingis and Drew Holiday in the same offseason. Like, just incredible work by the Celtics team to get to this point, and they are deserving champions, man. Every single, a lot of fans are going to try to put an asterisk on this championship, which, they do on every single championship. There could be, a little star placed to every champion's name in history because of an injury or a suspension or what have you. There are different circumstances for every year on why a team, may not have won the championship. But this team, I'm very confident in saying that they would have won the title regardless of if, these teams that they played were healthy. Regardless of if these teams were healthy. And in the finals, they play the Dallas Mavericks, where a lot of people are worried about how they're going to play after not really having a lot of competition the first 3 rounds. A lot of people picking the Mavericks for that reason, or a decent amount of them, and having this being a close series. It really wasn't. This team was dominant the whole way. They were the best team the whole season from the opening day of training camp, when they brought all these guys together and they all had their meeting and they talked about, we'll have to sacrifice roles to win. We all want to win at this point. They've been the best team all year. They all got to that goal. They have championship number 18 to retake that title as the most championships in NBA for a team at 18. And this team, it's going to be the favorite again next year. We're going to have a long off season to talk about everything that may happen going into next season. But this Celtics team is going to be the favorite, deservingly so, and rightfully so. Because also looking at it, this team is incredible, and all of their guys are under contract. When you look at this team, Drew Holiday signed his extension during the season, but all these guys are locked up for a while. Luke Cornett is their only rotational free agent. Drew Holiday signed his extension during the season. Porzingis signed his extension after he got traded, nearly immediately after he got traded. Derek White and Al Horford, it'll be the last year of them being under contract, but they will have the same team. Shout out to Al Horford, man, for getting his first championship. I don't know how we're an hour in, and I haven't even mentioned Al Horford really that much. We'll have a conversation later on this podcast, I'm sure, in future episodes when we have the guys back on about, is Al Horford a Hall of Famer? Is Drew Holiday a Hall of Famer? These two veterans that have been through a whole lot in their careers to get to this point. Now, Drew Holiday, a two-time champion. Al Horford, many-time All-Star, now champion. The key piece to this team for many, many years. There's a possibility that next year could be his last season because it is his final year under contract. And then being a free agent, he could just call it there. I mean, he's 38 years old. To do what he did in these playoffs is incredible. I mean, we probably take for granted now because we're seeing what LeBron James has done the last few years at the age that he's been out. But those things don't happen. Like all these historic numbers, you see them all the time, and it's because it's incredible what LeBron is doing. What Al Horford did in these playoffs was special. At 38 years old, to be putting up the numbers he did from three, and defensively he was spectacular this whole playoff run. And he's the one that really took the sacrifice, decided to come off the bench for the first time in his career. And when they needed him to step back into that starting role after Porzingis got injured, filled in perfectly. Shout out to the Boston Celtics. And man, another NBA season down. The first season of the Runnin the Paint podcast finally in the books. We will be back. We'll be back pretty soon. We'll start previewing the NBA draft, which will be next Thursday. May take a little break after this series because it's definitely been a grind, man. It's been a grind, but I can speak for all of us when we say that it's been a ton of fun to cover the NBA this season, talk about all things around the league. And we're excited for off-season pods. We got a lot of games that we could do, a lot of off-season things to speculate about. I mean, this is the first off-season where I believe teams are able to start talking to their free agents like tonight. Like since the season is over, they can really start now when this is uploaded, the first day of the off-season. Incredible. So many different things could happen this summer. But I think that this one thing is for sure, that the Boston Celtics will be the favorites next year. Rightfully so. Shout out to the Boston Celtics. Congratulations on being the 2024 NBA champions. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below about, this series, the Celtics winning this 2024 NBA championship. Your thoughts on the Mavericks going forward after this successful season, if they should make any changes on their guys' performances in this series. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. Leave a like, subscribe for more NBA content. Now, getting into the offseason, we'll get to the NBA draft. Appreciate you guys tuning into this solo podcast. It's 10-4. I need to go get some sleep. But yes, thank you guys so much for watching. Hope you have a great rest of your day, and we will catch you in the next one. Peace out, guys.